Rain moved across the diner windows like a slow, relentless hand, tapping out the hours in a language of cold glass and scattered light. Steam curled from a chipped mug between Maya's palms, fogging the tabletop, and the fluorescent sign outside buzzed like something struggling to keep going. Her phone screen read, "Unknown caller," before the lawyer's voice carved through the static of the booth. "We have the hearing at noon. If there's no proof of a stable residence and a household adult to share responsibility." Maya listened to the rest as if it were weather, a prediction she couldn't avoid. Her fingers tightened around the mug until she felt the porcelain bite into skin. Across the booth, Lily slept with a sweatshirt over her knees, a thin blanket bunched at her feet, thumb tucked under her chin. The kid's breath made tiny drums against the collarbone of the sweater. That ragged, ordinary rhythm was everything Maya had left. Her whisper didn't have the shape of a plan. It had the brittle animal sound of someone cataloging their losses in the dark. "I need to get married by tomorrow," she said, and the words fell into the diner's blue light like a plea dropped into a well. Around them, the diner hummed with other people's ordinary problems. A construction foreman counting tips, a couple arguing quietly over French fries, a tired nurse checking her watch. But the voice of the lawyer on the phone felt like thunder. The judge's calendar, Greg's stack of affidavits, the social worker's report. They all conspired into one simple, impossible timeline. If the court didn't see a home, if it didn't hear that there was an adult who would be there for the child, Lily could be placed in foster care. The thought was cold enough to make the coffee taste acrid. Maya's jaw worked. She thought of the flat behind the cleaner's supply closet where she'd been sleeping for weeks, of the nights crunched into the back seat of her car when shifts ran long. She thought of the rent notices, the pink slips, the sudden black hole an employer's phone call made the week she missed work to care for Lily after a fever. She had been a steady machine at the diner for 3 years. Plates wiped before anyone could leave a ring, salt and pepper jars refilled, a smile saved for when it mattered. Yet paperwork and bank statements had a way of rendering human effort into numbers she didn't own. At the next table, uneven light fell across a pair of small hands building a figurine out of an empty sugar packet. A little girl with hair in quick curls hummed to herself, oblivious to the tension she sat beside. She had a purple backpack and crooked front teeth that showed when she laughed. Liam watched her from the same corner of the diner where Maya had been sitting for the last 3 nights, nursing coffee, holding his own world together with mechanic's calluses, and a list of things that needed fixing around a house that never seemed to stay fixed for long. Liam had been a construction foreman long enough to know what weather could do to a roof, and long enough to know what people were willing to hold on to even when tides turned. Emma, his daughter, had just learned to balance on a curb without holding his hand. He watched the way Maya's shoulders hunched when she stared at her phone. He watched the way she tucked Lily's blanket under the child's chin with a thumb so careful it contradicted the threadbare sleeve of her coat. When the call ended, Maya folded her hands into each other until the knuckles white. She looked toward the diner's window, toward the rain that had been making a pattern across the town like a map of tiny, private tragedies. She said it again, quieter this time, as if saying it another way might unstick a new reality. "I need to get married by tomorrow." Liam heard it because he was a man who listened to the small sounds that meant more than they seemed to. He set his coffee down gently, his plated sandwich untouched, and let the hum of conversation fill the space for a second. Then he slid his chair closer, the vinyl squeaking. He could have stayed out of it, he could have given money and walked on. He had, in other lives, watched people take a coin and look away. This wasn't charity, he told himself. It was a decision. "Look," he said, and his voice was not loud, but it had the steady timbre of someone used to calling a crew to a task. "I'm not offering a shameful handout. I've got a roof that leaks in the laundry room, but the rest of it holds. I've got an extra room. I can put my name where it helps. Not to humiliate you, if this is what you need, it's plain and honest. A place where Lily can sleep in a bed that isn't the back seat. You help around here, cook, keep the place tidy, whatever needs doing. We do it as neighbors or as whatever it takes." Maya looked up as if the words were a lantern. There was an instinct in her to resist. Pride was an old thing that had kept her upright when the world tried to topple her. She pictured other men, The kind who would want to run a tape measure across her life and decide she wasn't worth the investment. She pictured Greg's smooth voice, the man who had once married her when they were young enough to believe the promises, who now had a file cabinet of reasons to take Lily away. Greg had a way of making the law sound like a house with doors he could close. Liam did not have that voice. He had hands the color of worked wood and a smile that looked like it had been trained by practical things. Lily blinked awake, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. She saw the man and the little girl, the stranger's hands folded politely. She did not understand the legalese. She only knew her mother's eyes looked different, like a shirt soaked through and wrung out. She crawled to Maya's lap and hid her face against the crook of Maya's elbow. Maya's breath hitched. There were questions, always questions. Proof, a mailing address, a lease or a mortgage, or, failing that, the name of a person willing to say, truthfully, that they regularly shared responsibility for the child. Liam said he would be there. He would sign what needed signing to show he provided a home. He would let his address be used. He would do it honestly. Receipts of grocery runs, photos of the girls making dinner, a video of bedtime stories read aloud. The actual messy life. He would be witness to presence more than ownership. And in the small way he could help, he would throw his weight. Maya's first thought was the courthouse. Its marble steps slick with rain, the clerk's indifferent desk, the manila folder that could carry away her life. Her second thought was of Lily, small and content, unaware. Pride said no. Survival said yes. Why? Maya asked finally, as if the question needed permission to exist. Why would you do that? Liam replied with something softer than explanations. Because I remember what it's like to stand on a porch with your whole life packed into a trunk. Because my ex got the house in the settlement and I got the weekends and the bills. Because my daughter deserves a neighbor who doesn't turn away when someone needs help. He scratched at a nick on his palm where a wire had once sliced his skin. I know what it is to have a name that means food on a table. I can give you a place to be real. He laid a 20 on the table in front of him. Small, insufficient. It wasn't charity, it was an offer. For Maya, an offer was the distance between her and a toehold. You understand there are risks, he said. There'll be questions. Papers, it's not a get out. You'll have to let people see you, let someone watch how you live. You'll have to let me be a witness to that life. The word witness landed differently than husband. It did not rewrite the marriage certificate. It rewired the story. A man offering to be the person who could truthfully say, I saw this child in a home. It honored Maya's agency. It did not demand she swallow her pride for his pity. She sat with the way the sentence sounded in her head, like a strange new name dropped into old hurt. The diner lights hummed. The rain made a soft, steady applauding. Lily's head bumped against Maya's collarbone when she shifted. Maya pressed her lips together. Her voice, when she found it, was small and raw. If it helps keep Lily, if it keeps her, then I'll do it. Liam nodded. His calloused thumb rubbed the edge of a paper napkin. We'll keep it honest. I'll take the papers to the shelter of my mailbox. I'll let the caseworker come over if needed. We'll make a life that shows how she's loved. They began with small, practical arrangements. An address, a phone number, a plan to move Lily's few things into Liam's house before dawn. They agreed to show up as a household, not as a production. They agreed that what they were creating had to be as much a real shelter as it was a legal anchor. That distinction mattered to both of them. Maya because dignity had contours, and Liam because he believed in practical love more than grand gestures. Before they left the diner, Maya called her sister. An old voice, a sympathetic no. She called her employer and lied when asked where she'd be sleeping that night. She packed Lily's sweater into a duffel she could carry in one arm. The rain had eased to a fine mist by the time they stepped under the diner awning and into the city's gray breath. Liam's truck smelled like oil and old coffee. The front seat had a faded map of towns he'd fixed roofs in. Lily held tight to Maya's hand, small and sure, and Emma reached across the seat to offer a plastic crown she'd been saving from some restaurant kid's meal. Lily accepted it like an agreement. The house Liam offered sat a town over, a modest framed place with a porch swing that made a hollow, inviting sound when it moved. The gutters needed work. One shingle had come loose last winter and slumped on the roof like a dropped thought. Inside, the living room smelled faintly of sawdust and lemon oil. A stack of tool catalogs and a toaster sat on the side table. An extra room was painted pale blue, a few scuffs on the wall, a shelf of books with the spines arranged by color rather than subject. In the hallway hung a crooked mirror with a scuff that looked like a face if you stared long enough. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It needed to be real. They moved quickly. Maya cleared out the spare closet to make space for Lily's clothes, smoothing shirts into a drawer and tucking little socks beside them. The mattress was firm but welcoming. Lily immediately made a fort under the window with a throw blanket and a flashlight, testing the new geography like a small explorer staking claim. That night, they practiced living in the way people rehearse languages before a big trip. Awkward, imperfect, full of things to translate. They cooked pasta with canned sauce and added whatever fresh herbs Liam could find in a pot on the windowsill. Emma taught Lily a card game that involved clapping and laughing in neat rhythms. The sound of it folded warm into the kitchen. Maya washed dishes with meticulous care, the clink of plates a tiny metronome against a pulse of fear. Liam dried, fingers rough and slow, and when he handed the towel he always left the edge to her as if to say, "Here, take back what you need of this life." They filmed a short, honest video. Lily brushing her teeth with Emma, both in mismatched pajamas, spitting into a sink that had a hairline crack, but a good faucet. Liam sat on the bed and read a story, his voice settling the room. Maya tucked Lily in and kissed her forehead with an urgency that was almost visible. The lens caught the crooked mirror and the chipped lamp, the unvarnished wood floors. The frames were not staged, they were real. They saved grocery receipts and scanned the library card application with Maya's name. They made a weekly chore list and signed it in purple marker. Take out trash, sweep porch, feed Emma's fish, call Lily's school. It read like small promises that could be held up in court and be true. Days carved themselves into tactile work. Dawn bleaching the blinds, coffee steam and the click of a kettle. The sharp smell of bleach when Maya scrubbed the bathroom before a social worker's visit. The rag moving in a steady, almost prayerful rhythm. Liam fixed Lily's bike chain in the driveway with grease-smudged fingers, teaching the child how to balance weight and trust. He showed her how to tighten the bolts on a loose pedal, and then, when Lily wobbled, he steadied her with one steadying hand on the back of her jersey. Maya watched and felt something inside her loosen like a leash unclipping. There were awkward moments, too. Nights when Emma's father called and reminded Liam of old promises he hadn't kept. Evenings when the girls fought over a blanket, and Maya found herself snapping in a way that made her feel guilty. There were late bills, and a social worker whose stare weighed like a ledger. Greg's shadow lingered at the edges of everything, his name on a file stamped with dates, a crisp paper with his attorney's header sliding under Maya's door like a meteor. She felt watched by the future as much as by the present. In the early hours before the hearing, they rehearsed answers. What Lily called whom at night, who fixed the leaky sink, who read bedtime stories. Not canned scripts, but honest rehearsals of the life they had lived for the small, desperate unit of days that now counted like years. When a friend from the church asked if they were living together, Maya would say, "We are a household under the same roof." It was a careful truth. There were small victories. A caseworker's notebook recorded that the house had a stable routine, that food was available, that a supportive adult, Liam, was present. A neighbor offered to be a character witness about how he'd seen the children playing on the lawn, that Liam took Lily to the park when it rained, and that Maya appeared engaged and attentive. They saved grocery receipts that showed Lily's name on the school lunch program, and a library card with her barcode. They captured the ordinary, a paper crown at breakfast, a scraped knee soothed with an old bandage, a picture painted with too many colors and taped to the fridge. And yet the threat hovered. The past has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. Greg's file did not have pity in it. He had found a way into the record through a phone call to the investigator assigned to the case. He spoke with the legal calm of someone used to pressing switches, numbers, accounts, failed rent notices. He sent a spreadsheet that traced back Maya's employment gaps, notes from a former manager and a bounced check. The documents were slick and relentless in their certainty. They implied instability, as if a person's history could be reduced to a single line that did not allow for context or the invisible labor of holding a child when no one else would. Maya read the files in the kitchen, elbows on the table, tears making small hot spots on her inner wrist where she tried to rub the panic away. Lily was at school. Emma was at a friend's house for a morning play date Liam had arranged to keep the rhythm of normal. The house was quiet in a way that let paper rattles seem louder than they should. Maya pressed her forehead into her folded hands and breathed. "You can walk away," she said without looking up, and the sentence was not directed only at Liam. It was at every person who had a legal advantage because another person had been too poor to afford $50 extra for a lawyer. It was at a system that evaluated motherhood like an expense report. Liam set down a mug and leaned across the table. His hand smelled of grease and lemon oil. "No," he said. He did not say it with bravado. He said it like someone naming a thing real, a refusal. "I won't let you walk away. Not from this." The presence of his refusal did something to the architecture of fear. It did not remove the danger. It rearranged the stakes. It forced the world to reckon with more than documents. They decided to do another thing that had a risk. Record a longer handheld video that would show not just a still frame of a tidy bed, but the motion of a day. The footage would show the morning scramble. Emma spilling cereal and Maya teaching Lily to tie her shoelace, Liam breathing out a laugh when plates clinked in the sink. The truth lived in the clumsy, in the not quite perfect. It lived in the way repairs were made and apologies were offered. They needed to prove to a person in a robe that presence mattered more than pristine bank statements. Maya's phone vibrated while she loaded the washer. The screen said, "Henderson and Associates." She nearly dropped the soap. "Yes?" she answered, voice steady out of habit. It was Mr. Henderson, the polite administrative tone of a man who cleans administrative edges with the same steady hand he used to push legal buttons. "We've been reviewing the supplemental documents," he said. "Your ex has some concerns he plans to present." "What kind of concerns?" Maya asked, trying to keep the tremor out. "We've flagged discrepancies in employment dates, some unresolved debt. He intends to argue the household is not financially stable enough to offer primary custody." The pause that followed was a paper rustle. "Unless you can provide evidence to the contrary, his counsel is preparing to move for temporary placement." Maya pressed the heel of her hand into her eye sockets until stars burst like tiny broken light bulbs. In the laundry room, the washer spun like a small hurricane, indifferent. Papers multiplied at the edges of their lives like storm surge. She sat on the floor then, the tile cold through the sock. The laundry basket was halfway full. Emma's pink socks peered like flags. She thought of lying down and letting the world decide for her. She thought of a future where she saw Lily through a window like someone watching a life she once warmed. She thought of the neighborhood dogs that barked but refused to bite when people walked by. And she thought, sharp, cruel, of the kind of victory Greg sought, the kind that would prove he could buy more than his past purchase of promises. "Tomorrow," she said into the dark of the laundry room, because it gave her an edge she could grasp. "They want tomorrow." "You don't have to do this alone," Liam said. And he had that weight again. Hands that had physically carried things. Hands that could lift the small world they shared. "We'll go through everything. We'll put together receipts, actual receipts. We'll show the video. We'll bring the neighbor. We'll tell the truth, Maya. We'll tell them how you helped the children, and how the kid's teacher says Lily is engaged, and how she's never been missed from class." There were nights when Maya could not sleep for thinking of things she should have done differently. There were mornings when a child's laugh made the list of failures seem only that, a list. She had not wanted to drag Liam into this. She had not wanted to make his house a stage. But the urgent animal part of her, the part that would throw her body across an invisible line to save her child, had no patience for moral dilution. It wanted a roof and a bed and a witness who would not leave. When the sun came up the next morning, the clouds opened like a reluctant curtain. The house smelled faintly of soap and cooked onions. Lily slept until the scraping light on the windowsill woke her. She came down blinking, wearing last night's shirt and a crown that had been abandoned on the counter. Her small face was a map that no piece of paper could redraw. At the kitchen table, documents with careful handwriting spread out like small honest flags. A library card, grocery receipts, a photograph of Lily and Emma with peeled paint on their fingers from a craft afternoon, a signed notice from the neighbor who'd agreed to be a character witness. Liam printed screenshots from his phone, text exchanges that showed him asking how Lily's homework was going, and confirming he'd pick her up from school when Maya's shift ran late. The pile felt absurdly inadequate in the face of gleaming affidavits and Greg's poised handwriting. Maya's pulse thudded at an even pace that had nothing to do with calmness and everything to do with working muscles. She read each line as if the font were a path she had to walk. She set the documents in a manila envelope and wrote, "For court," on the front like a prayer. This small envelope carried the heft of 1,000 small hands. They rehearsed one more time. Questions and plain answers. Not a script. Just the truth they would tell. That Lily slept in her own bed most nights. That she had meals. That she had a responsible adult who read to her. That Maya had steady employment as a cleaning waitress and a track record of employment, punctuated by unavoidable gaps. That they had community support. They turned the video off and watched the file's thumbnail blink like a dormant heart, waiting to be trusted with proof. It was around mid-morning when Maya got the text with the subject line that made the room tilt, a single line from Greg's lawyer. "We have uncovered additional financial discrepancies. Expect an amended motion." The link opened to a document that smelled of accusation and cold ink. Maya's fingers hovered over the screen, the palms of her hands sticky from dish soap. The document listed past evictions and a tax lien she had forgotten to pay in a messy summer, when the heater went out, and she had to pick between fixing it and keeping an intake shift. Panic was a foreign currency she'd learned to trade in smaller amounts. This was a market crash. It felt like betrayal, like the undoing of all the small, honest things they had built. She imagined a judge scowling over one sheet and writing off a life with a single tick. Knees suddenly weak, she slid down the kitchen cabinet and sat on the floor with her back to the warm oven, a child of 37, suddenly very small. "Is this it?" she said. And maybe she was asking the room, maybe she was asking herself. Liam sat down beside her, the wood click of the chair on the tile like an anchor. "Not if I can help it," he said. They made calls. They called the library to confirm Lily's account. They called the school nurse to verify Lily's immunization. They dug into drawers for every scrap of guilt-proof paper they could find. The courthouse seemed like a larger beast when it had an extra tooth. They had to find a way to show the judge the life that paper couldn't be bothered with, how Lily's fingers fit in Maya's, how a patched bike could still teach balance, how two children laughed into the same quiet corner. Maya thought about stepping back, about accepting something she'd never wanted to accept. The idea that the system might be indifferent in the face of a life that didn't present like money. She thought of the way the kitchen table had become a legal desk, strewn with evidence like domestic life had been subpoenaed and found suspect. When Emma brought over a drawing to tape on the refrigerator, a lopsided house, 2 stick figures, and a gold sun, they both smiled. That picture was evidence too, if anyone cared to read it. 2 children living in the same house, making a future out of crayons and elbow grease. But the call from Greg's lawyer arrived like a new weather front. "You'll need more than receipts," the voice on the other end said. "We're prepared to argue that this arrangement is temporary and contrived." The word contrived clung to the air like steam. Maya thought of the kitchen, of the fort, of the nights they had shared peanut butter sandwiches and watched a flicker of television together. She thought of the way Lily's laughter could disarm anyone who was not purposely cruel. She thought of how insecurity gnawed at them even when the evidence of love lived in the crook of a bedtime story. The law, it seemed, liked permanence on paper. Liam put his hand over hers. There was no glamour in it, his fingers roughened by work. There was, however, a firm willingness. "We'll show the judge the truth," he said. "We'll show costs of groceries, our chore board, the video. We'll bring witnesses. We'll show that, no matter what he says, we are a stable, caring household for Lily." Maya wanted to believe him with the whole slickness of her soul. But there was a part of her that recoiled. The idea of using kindness as evidence felt like a kind of exposure. She braced herself for the humiliation of being inspected for what she had, and for what she didn't. On the morning before the hearing, they loaded the truck with the things that indicated everyday life. Lily's small backpack, Emma's craft box, the duffel with spare clothes, the box of photos. Liam's neighbor agreed to come and testify about seeing the children play. A church volunteer offered to support them at the courthouse. They wrapped the video files onto a portable drive and held it like a talisman. Maya walked the house before they left like someone taking inventory of herself. She smoothed the bed covers, tucked a blanket over the foot of Lily's bed, took the crown and put it at the foot like a ribboned flag. She touched the chipped lamp and the crooked mirror and hummed to herself. There was no prophecy here, only a woman making sure a life was visible enough to be believed. At the courthouse steps, the rain this time fell soft, as if in conversation. People crossed paths with their own histories tucked under arms. The courthouse doors were heavy. The air inside smelled like old books and varnish. Greg's presence was a shadow in the hallway. He looked like a man who had rehearsed victory until it fit like a suit. His attorney held a folder the color of autumn. The edges of his cuffs were precise. There was a posture to people who had practiced power. They sat in the chairs of waiting rooms where conversations fell into low rhythms. The cases ahead were a congregation of small private storms: eviction, custody, fines. Maya's hands wouldn't stop shaking. The envelope with the evidence trembled visibly against her thigh. Emma held Lily's hand, both of them quiet, armored in innocence. A court officer called a name that sounded like a bell. They rose together, a small unit built from last-minute courage. Inside the courtroom, the air felt tighter, as if measured and rationed. The judge, Judge Harrison, had a face that wore both patience and the kind of clarity that came from seeing too many people at the margins. He had a way of looking at people like he was checking for the private things they carried. Greg's attorney opened crisply, the pages of documents making a clean sound. "Your Honor," he said, voice practiced, "the petitioner's financial history demonstrates a lack of stability. Evidence included in our motion indicates irregular employment, unresolved debts, and a living situation that appears temporary. We move for temporary placement pending further review." He slid the documents across like a neat stack of possibility, and then waited. Maya's hand tightened on the envelope in her lap. Her pulse was a drumbeat she'd learned not to ignore. Liam rose when it was his turn, not to argue the technicalities, but to speak plainly about what he had seen and done. He spoke of evening chores, of who took Lily to school, of a night he sat up with a fevered child and watched Maya's face shift from exhaustion to that fierce kind of care that was not for sale. "And you'll testify your name was used to show a household?" the attorney asked, with a look that suggested he had already imagined a man like Liam as an actor in a play written by the financially secure. Liam nodded. "I'll testify I helped with the house. I'll testify I prepared meals and was present," he said. He touched the portable drive in his breast pocket like an amulet. "I'll testify I saw these children at my table, and I can prove it." The attorney leaned forward as if to see where the truth might hide. The judge's pen hovered like an impartial bird. For a moment the room narrowed to the weight of Liam's hands and Maya's eyes. But then, as if an extra gust of weather had blown through the courtroom, a clerk whispered into the judge's ear. His face, which had been a steady wash of impartiality, shifted. He asked to see a supplemental filing. Greg's attorney smiled, the kind of smile that comes with the satisfaction of a well-timed reveal. Maya's throat closed. The supplemental document was thin but precise. It pointed at a tax lien and at a year where Maya's rent had been deferred and an eviction filed. It suggested a pattern that, on its face, could argue instability. The judge read it and then, with the same pen, made a note about scheduled evidence. Maya felt the room tilt. Her hands were small, and the envelope in them suddenly felt weightless and inadequate. The question in the courtroom was not only about roofs and beds, but about whether a life stitched together by small, honest acts could hold against the cold arithmetic of ledgers. When the judge finally looked up, his gaze rested on her as much as on the documents. There was compassion there, but also that judicial distance that weighs facts. "We will proceed carefully," he said. "I need to hear from those who can attest to the nature of this household. It was a sentence that held both danger and a sliver of hope, a thread they would have to pull. Outside on the courthouse steps, the rain had started again, light and persistent. Maya pressed her thumb into the chapped skin of her wrist, as if she could steady the tremor that lived there. She had come as far as she could with receipts and video. Now the rest depended on how a stranger in a robe would weigh the evidence of love against the authority of paper. They walked back to the truck in silence, each step measured. The house waiting at the end of the day was both a shelter and a fragile thing. Lily asked if they were going to be okay, and Maya answered in the only way she could, by squeezing the small hand at her side and offering a smile that was mostly hope. Liam started the engine with that quiet competence that had become their secret pillar. It was on the drive home that Maya's phone buzzed again. A message, terse, from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it with the kind of slow curiosity you reserve for bracing weather warnings. The text was short and clinical. Evidence of additional personal debts has been forwarded to opposing counsel. We advise caution. Maya's breath snagged. She gripped the phone like a small animal. What else? She asked aloud, and the truck's low hum answered. There was a knock on the passenger window. Liam had pulled the truck to the side beneath a dim streetlight. When she rolled down the glass a crack, a young woman stood there with a plastic file folder. She looked like a person who had been waiting in the rain for something that mattered. Her name was Carla. She lived across the street from Greg once upon a time and had seen things, not all of them flattering. You need to see this before tomorrow, she said. Her voice was flat, not unkind. She slid a piece of paper into the truck. Maya unfolded it with fingers that did not trust their own speed. The line items were direct. A string of payments to a place that had been closed down, a disputed check, small tastes of vulnerability that Greg's attorney could show under the right light as negligence. The list was not a confirmation of villainy. It was human failure mapped in ink. Who gave you this? Maya asked. Carla shrugged. Neighbors talk. People keep receipts. I thought you should know. She tapped the folder with a sober gesture. They say he's been collecting things for a case. Might be nothing. Might be something. But you need to be ready. Maya felt the cold of the night bite under her coat. The folder crinkled like a whisper. The small practical things they had piled together, receipts, videos, neighbor testimony, now needed to withstand a rain of documents meant to suggest a life unfit for custody. It was hard to fight an organization built to see people as files. Liam started the engine and looked at her. We'll bring everything, he said. We'll put it all on the table. We'll tell the honest story. That's what we have. Maya wanted to believe him utterly. She wanted to feel the kind of faith that dissolves fear. But there's a difference between faith and the thin membrane of hope when you have an envelope in your hands and a judge's eyebrow to cross. They went home that night with a plan. To prepare more documents, to gather more witnesses, to make the ordinary visible in a way that could be read by people who preferred numbers. They printed bank statements and wrote letters from people at the church who had seen her care for Lily. They recorded a longer video, candid and raw. Lily waking in the morning, Maya's hair pulled back as she made breakfast, Liam sweeping the porch with slow, methodical care. They filmed the girls at the table coloring and sharing goldfish crackers. They saved every receipt, tucked them in folders labeled by date. The house felt like a file cabinet stacked with living things. At midnight, after the girls had been put to bed and the lights in the kitchen were soft, Maya stood at the sink with her hands in warm water and watched the suds slide down the drain. She thought of the phrase she'd spoken in the diner, the one that had set everything into motion. I need to get married by tomorrow. It had been a desperate, foolish thing to say, the sort of edge-of-the-abyss cry that people let out when the world tightens its fists. But it had been true in the sense that she had sought a way to make her life visible in a system that measured stability by the presence of an extra adult's name. Now in the quiet of the kitchen, she understood the difference between a name on a paper and a hand that held hers through the night. Her life, messy and imperfect, was threaded with small acts that no single document could fully capture. It could be verified, perhaps, by people who watched and by the sound of two children laughing in the next room. It could not be neatly wrapped in the kind of proof Greg's attorney preferred. That would be their argument. presence over perfection. The clock moved toward dawn. When the morning light came, it brought with it an envelope with a new stamp. Greg's attorney's office. The timing was a blade. The letter inside was brief and efficient, a notice that they intended to call forth testimony regarding the alleged discrepancies, and that they had compiled additional evidence. Maya slid down against the wall and let the morning air wash over her face. Lily padded out, hair ragged, eyes clear and unknowing. She climbed into Maya's lap with the casual entitlement of a child who trusted the universe could hold her. "Are you okay, Mama?" she asked. The question was simple. The answer had many moving parts. Maya kissed the top of Lily's head and felt both fierce and fragile at once. "We're going to try," she answered, and the words were more promise than plan. They left for the courthouse with the portable drive tucked in Liam's jacket and a folder of documents in Maya's bag. The air was thin and bright with a winter that refused to settle. At the courthouse doors, they took a breath. A woman on the steps murmured a blessing as they passed, an old habit from a Church Street evangelist who said small kindnesses like prayers. Inside, the waiting room smelled of printer ink and hopelessness. The judge would not be moved by gestures, but gestures could be evidence too. The neighbor who testified about seeing the children playing, the teacher who vouched for Lily's attendance and care, the church volunteer who would speak to Maya's character. They had built a case out of ordinary acts. They were called in. The courtroom filled with the soft rustle of files and the sharper sound of a pen scratching notes. Greg's attorney rose with a flourish and placed his stack on the table. Greg's attorney pushed his stack of papers forward like a set of tiled dominoes, each one promising a neat collapse. He spoke with the practiced cadence of someone who had spent a life translating human mess into neat categories: arrears, evictions, inconsistencies. He framed the narrative the way a camera frames a subject, close and unkind. "For the record," he said, voice cool, "we have evidence suggesting that the respondent's living situation is transient. We have notices of late payments and a tax lien. We contend that the current presentation of a household is a recent construct, designed to obscure ongoing instability. We ask the court to consider temporary placement." The words landed and made the small room feel even smaller. Maya's envelope sat like a heartbeat on her lap. The pages inside were not armor, but honesty folded into paper. She watched Greg's attorney speak, and felt the edges of everything she had built vibrate under his voice. The judge, Judge Harrison, folded his hands and looked over his glasses. He did not seem surprised by the cadence. He had, by habit, learned to listen for what a voice left out as much as for what it said. "Counsel," he said slowly, "I will consider the documents, but the court must determine the child's best interest based not solely on accounts of financial solvency, but on evidence of caregiving, stability of routine, and the presence of supportive adults." That phrase, best interest, hung in the air like a scale. The attorney for Greg nodded with a thin smile, as if he could trust the scale to tilt his way. He called a private investigator who recited dates and numbers with the slick authority of a machine. He called an ex-manager who could point to attendance gaps. The case was surgical in its intent: pick at a pattern and hope the whole cloth unraveled. When it was their turn, Liam rose with the deliberate slowness of someone who knew a ladder by the feel of its rungs. He had printed the video onto a portable drive and wrapped the cords like something sacred. He did not dress himself in rhetoric. He walked to the stand like a man going to a task. "You may proceed," Judge Harrison said. Liam spoke plainly. He told them, to anyone listening, what anyone who had lived with them could testify to: mornings of cereal and backpacks, nights of bandaged knees and whispered apologies, a ritual of reading that softened an evening. He said, "I helped fix the bike chain. I picked Lily up from school. I bought groceries because she had a double shift and couldn't get there." He let the specifics stand like stones on a path. Each one was something a person could look at and say, yes, that happened. Greg's attorney pushed back, asking how long the living arrangement had been in place, whether it had been formed expressly to influence a legal proceeding. The subtext oiled every question. Was this an honest household or a contrived image? Liam did not hedge. "We moved some of Lily's things here when we needed to," he said. We made the house a place she slept at most nights the past few weeks. We didn't fake meals or smiles. The kids actually ate at this table. I don't pretend the ledger is perfect. I only say what I have seen and what I did." He reached into his jacket and placed the portable drive on the bench where the court clerk could handle it. The courtroom technician set up a small screen and clicked the file. The footage was honest in its amateurish way, shaky at the start, sunlight haloing the edge of the frame, the clatter of spoons, imperfect dialogue between children. Lily and Emma, pajama-crowned, painted each other's nails with too much giggling. Maya's hands, caught doing the small chores, were steady. Liam read a story and mispronounced a word, and they all laughed. It was not a stage, it was breath, plates, scraped knees, a chipped lamp. The video ended with Maya tucking Lily in and kissing the child's forehead so hard the frame blurred for a moment. The jury, if a courtroom could be called a jury of ordinary witnesses, felt that blur as a confirmation rather than a trick. Greg's attorney argued the video could be staged. He called it a recent compilation designed for effect. He pointed to dates and asked whether the receipts proved long-term stability. He wanted permanence on paper. Presence, he implied, could be manufactured. Then the court heard from those who had encountered the house as it was. A neighbor with a clipboard recited the mornings he'd seen two girls racing down the front path. He admitted quietly that he hadn't known them well before, but that he had seen the routine. A man making sure both children had lunchboxes, a woman waving as she left for work. The neighbor's voice was the voice of someone who watched life happen in small, consistent acts. A teacher from Lily's school spoke with even clarity about attendance and engagement. She told the court that Lily had shown signs of stability the past month, homework done, a participation in class, and a resilience that suggested someone at home read to her and fed her. The social worker who had visited the house sat with an evidence folder and spoke without sentimentality. She recounted what she observed: beds, a consistent morning routine on the days she visited, groceries in the pantry corresponding with receipts, and children observed to be clean and nourished. She marked the house not perfect, but functional, and perhaps for the first time in a while, a place where a child's needs were met regularly. Greg's attorney pushed for weight on the financial thread. He raised the tax lien and the eviction notice and asked if these were indicators of ongoing risk. Judge Harrison listened, the way a person listens when both sides of a story are being told in earnest. He looked at Maya, who sat with Liam's hand on the small of her back, an impossible anchor. When it was Maya's turn to speak, not to plead but to answer, she rose with the kind of steadiness that had come from standing up every morning and meeting her life's demands. She did not give speeches about love or destiny. She told the court the age-plain truth that a child needed a bed and someone who knew her habits. She described Lily's favorite lunch, the way she liked her socks mismatched, the sound she made when she read. She said, without flourish, that she worked at the diner and kept appointments because Lily needed plates that weren't scraped, heat that didn't go cold. She told them, simply, about the nights she had chosen to miss a paycheck to stay by a child's side. Her voice did not crack when she said the phrase that had begun everything in a diner corner. I said, and I thought it badly said, I need to get married by tomorrow. There was a small intake of breath in the courtroom, as if a collective ear had perked at the echo of the original plea. She explained that it had been less a literal demand than a shorthand for her fear. She needed adulthood and a witness to the life she offered her child. She had not asked for paperwork alone. She had asked for someone to say honestly that Lily had a place to sleep and someone in the life who could vouch for it. That admission could have been a liability. It could have been spun as contrivance. Instead, because she had said it with ownership and because witnesses corroborated the life she described, it became part of the texture of her truth. Judge Harrison leaned forward, undid the slow roll of assessment he had carried like a habit, and addressed the room with a clarity born of the job. This court recognizes that financial records matter. They reflect a reality. They do not, however, encompass the totality of a child's life. The question is not whether every paper is immaculate. The question is whether the child's needs are met and whether the child will be safe and nurtured. He looked at Greg's attorney and then at Maya. What I take from the files and from testimony, both documentary and personal, is this. There has been a recent, demonstrable pattern of consistent care in this home. That care has been witnessed by neighbors, the school, and the social worker. That does not erase prior difficulties. It does, however, speak of the present and of the provision of daily needs. Greg's attorney rose again and argued for a temporary placement, caution reflected in every word. But Judge Harrison's decision did not hinge on a blackout of caution. It threaded caution with practical care. He ruled that custody would remain with Maya, that Lily would reside primarily in the household where she currently lived, and that the court would schedule follow-up assessments to ensure continued stability. He asked that services be made available, assistance with budgeting, referrals to a local employment counselor, which he hoped might soften the edges of future risk. It is the court's duty to protect the child, he said. It is also the court's duty to preserve family where genuine caregiving exists. This home, imperfect, real, has shown the evidence of caregiving. Temporary monitoring will continue, and the court will require periodic reports, but immediate removal of the child is not in the child's best interest. The gavel came down like a small exhale. Maya's body folded in on itself for a moment. The sound of the judge's action was not thunder, but something softer, like the closing of a book with a relieved thumb. Tears blurred the edges of her vision. She felt Liam's arm move around her, steady as a brace. Outside the courthouse, the rain had paused as if to let the world take stock. People shuffled along the steps, caught in the small after-silence of a result that did not erase future work. Greg stood a short distance away. He did not storm off as a caricature of villainy might. He waited with a folded posture, as if to consider the next move in a life that had many cells beyond this courtroom. He offered Maya a nod that was not friendly and not cruel, merely the acknowledgement of someone who had fought and not won. Later, as she walked back to Liam's truck with Lily's hand tucked in hers, Maya felt the future as both an opening and a responsibility. The judge's order was not an ending. It was a mandate to continue the labor of proving day in and day out that a child could be loved and kept. It was, in its own institutional language, a second chance. The house that evening hummed with an ordinary victory. Neighbors dropped by with lasagnas made to share. A volunteer from the church brought over a small box of donated winter coats for the children. They celebrated in the language they had used all along: soup, laughter under electric light, the clatter of dishes, and the sound of two children inventing a dance in the doorway. Liam fixed a broken step on the porch with a bit of spare wood and a measured sound of hammering that felt like punctuation. There was a moment on the porch swing when the three of them, Maya, Liam, and Lily, sat side by side and watched the two children chase a red ball down the lawn until it rolled into a neighbor's yard, and they had to wait for permission to retrieve it. The setting sun made the paint on the house look warmer than it had any right to be. It highlighted the scuff marks like memories of things survived. Maya thought about the line she had said first in the diner's blue light. The phrase had cut through the night because it was a desperate shorthand. She had wanted a name that would anchor her life in the eyes of people who read documents for a living. She had not wanted marriage for the romantic sweep of it. She had wanted a witness to presence. As she sat, she realized she had not gotten married. She had found a man who placed his name beside a life and who stayed when the world asked him to leave. She had found hands that would fix a bicycle and fingers that would wipe a hot forehead. She had found someone who, for reasons that were not reducible to heroism or pity, had chosen to help her keep her child. That choice, quiet, stubborn, practical, was the miracle. Not a thunderclap from the sky, but the small, relentless work of people showing up. It was a roof mended, a meal prepared, a night spent reading nonsense stories until a child's eyelids drifted closed. It was the kind of miracle that left fingerprints on dishes and grease on an index finger, and a story someone could tell another person without needing to call it holy. Days after the hearing, life settled into a rhythm that was both ordinary and new. Lily returned to school with a backpack that bore a new patch sewn by Emma. She began to make friends across the street, and Maya managed shifts and met with a counselor provided through the court's recommendations. Liam continued to work the long hours that paid a different kind of rent: dependability. He and Maya learned to split responsibilities in a home that felt increasingly like something they were building instead of borrowing. Greg called once. a voice on the line that sought a closure he had not expected to find. He said, not angrily, but with the weariness of someone who had been in a long fight, "I will be available for supervised visits." The admission was small and practical. It did not absolve his choices, nor did it paint him as cruel. It simply marked a boundary, one he would honor to the degree the family court required. Months later, when neighbors walking by saw Lily leave for school with a lunchbox in hand and a wave that was offered with a growing ease, they nodded as if to an insight. That family can be the work of a few hands willing to keep showing up. Time, the most patient of critics, had begun to attest to the life they had created. On a Sunday afternoon, Maya sat on the porch swing with a mug of coffee warming her palms. The swing creaked in a way that felt like a letter being written. Lily and Emma chased each other in circles while Liam fixed a loose hinge on the gate, humming a tune that had no name. Maya watched the two children stumble and fall and get back up, trading a scraped knee for a new story. The front yard was full of the trivial evidence of a household. A sock pinned to a shrub, a toy truck left half in the dirt, a ladder leaning against the shadow of the roof. She thought of the diner, the blue light, her whispered sentence, "I need to get married by tomorrow." The words had been true in their urgency, a compressed way to ask for a kind of shelter that would convince a